Hello everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and welcome back to another episode of Wishful Thinking, a series where I just go off about just random ass ideas that I think would be pretty cool to see in a game one day. So yeah, hopefully I don't need to re-explain everything that I said in the first episode, but anyways, so the one I have for today is Project Cross Zone, which happens to be a tactical RPG that happens to have a crossover with Capcom, Bandai Namco, and Sega characters. So there's two of them on the 3DS, and then there was one on PS2, but the PS2 one was just between Namco and Capcom. And that one was Japan only, where the other two we actually got in English. So the whole idea of this series, I think, is a pretty kick-ass idea that is just full of mindless fan service, which is exactly what you would expect for a crossover game, and it does that perfectly. But the one downside to this series, though, is that I do feel that the gameplay in it and the way how they handled it, I feel like it's kind of disappointing compared to what the concept really is. Now, personally, I don't think the gameplay is terrible, but there are plenty of people that do. But if there's one thing I can agree with them on, is that I do feel like it is pretty disappointing compared to what it actually is. And by the way, this is coming from someone that is a huge fan of tactical RPGs like Final Fantasy Tactics, Growlancer, Stella Glow on the 3DS, and then there's Fire Emblem, and there's a bunch of others. So knowing all this, what I wanted to talk about today is just some ideas that I think would be pretty awesome if they ever were to continue the series and they were to make some huge improvements. So here it goes. So as for the gameplay, there is so many things that you can definitely do here, but we'll go over one thing at a time. So the first thing I want to mention is that if they're still going to stick with the tactical RPG stuff, I think they should change up the formula quite a bit. So the first idea with this I think they should do is that I feel like they should try to make a tactical RPG, but make it play similar to the Growlancer games, where you have a world map, and then whenever you bump into monsters, it just plays like a tactical RPG, and the series doesn't have a grid base like most other ones do. Instead, everything is all free range, but all the attacking and spells have a cooldown, and everything is moving around in real time. So it almost has a real-time strategy vibe to it almost, and I really love this system because I feel like it doesn't make any of the battles feel really slow. They all feel pretty quick. And that to me was one of the biggest problems with Project Cross Zone, was that most of the battles felt like they went on way too long. So having a battle system like this would make everything so much more pleasant to go through. And just like that series, you could have some equipment system going on there for characters to gain newer skills. And like I said about the world map, I think it would just be really cool just to see some of your favorite characters from these three companies going across different locations across the three. So that's one improvement idea I had in mind, was to make it similar to another favorite game of mine that unfortunately has been dead in the water for over 10 years now. Well, unless you count the Landgrisser 1 and 2 remaster, but the thing about that is that the gameplay in that one is not the same thing as Growlancer. But I do have one more idea that for a tactical RPG style, if they were to continue in that direction, is that because Bandai Namco is involved with this, does anyone remember that game mode within Soul Calibur 3 called Chronicles of the Sword mode? Yeah, now imagine that, but as a standalone game, with a crossover series with all these different characters. That would be pretty fucking awesome. And for those that don't know, Soul Calibur 3 is definitely one of my most favorite games in the Soul Calibur series, believe it or not, mainly because of that mode, because I spent so much time in that mode, and I never got sick of it either, and I've replayed it so many damn times. So for those that are unfamiliar, it's pretty much as he said, a real-time strategy game where you just move your units to different castles and you gotta take them over and then take over the enemy castles. But the thing that I really liked about it was that whenever your units would go up to another enemy or taking on a castle with enemies inside it, it would then go to a fighting game mode one-on-one and plays exactly like Soul Calibur. At the time, I thought it was very unique, and I also thought it was very addicting, and of course also helped too that I also loved using my created characters in this mode. Though, I don't know if they should make a created character feature in this new Project Cross Zone idea. I mean, I guess they could, but I'm sure it would be pretty overwhelming as it is. But if they did have one though, I would be totally down for it. Now, whenever it goes into the combat mode, It could play either like Soul Calibur, like I just said, or it can go into 2D fighting, kind of similar to Street Fighter, or it can go into like 3D fighting, similar to Virtua Fighter, or it can even go into arena fighting game, kind of similar to what Bandai Namco always seems to do with their anime fighters. But for me personally, I would take Soul Calibur and Street Fighter as my favorite ideas out of the ones I came up with here. And because this is like a standalone game and not just something that's just add on to a fighting game, what they can always do is that they can add like more other features to this to expand on it. Like they can have a bonding system, kind of similar to what the Fire Emblem games have, well, the later ones that is. And maybe you can be able to like customize like your own flag symbol and like all like your individual castles, like with like the different levels. Like maybe you can like do some customizations like that if they were not going to have a create a character feature. And like I said about the whole Growlancer concept, they can also add in some like different skills and knacks that you can acquire for characters. So those are the two ideas that I have for if they were to continue in the tactical RPG style that I think would be much better than what they have going right now currently. But I do have two other ideas for gameplay styles that I think would be pretty interesting, but also being very drastically different. So what they can always do is that they can always just ditch the whole tactical RPG aspect of it and make it a straight up beat 'em up. And I have two ideas for this. They can make it a 2D beat 'em up, kind of similar to the classic stuff like Final Fight, Streets of Rage, and all that stuff. Or they can make it a 3D beat 'em up, kind of similar to like a Warrior style game, although in this case maybe Warriors Orochi, given that they would both be crossovers, or they could also make it like Sengoku Basara, which also does have its differences. So let's cover the 2D aspect of it first. So yeah, just imagine having a 2D beat 'em up with like all these different characters just beating the shit out of some like random mucks, and of course, you know, random mucks being from like familiar games. Not only would that be amazing, but that would even be a contender as being one of the best 2D beat 'em ups of all time, and that's saying a lot. So yeah, this is a pretty simplistic idea, but the one thing that I think that they should do with this is that I feel like they should take some different ideas from some of the recent beat 'em ups that we've been getting lately, for such examples being Streets of Rage 4, where it has that like survival mode where you just get to beat up like waves of enemies, and as you go up you can actually like gain like newer power-ups for your character permanently. Or they can take some elements from the game Fight and Rage, which has a pretty cool combo system. So that's all I really need to say about that. It would definitely be a beat 'em up that I would like never get tired of. And as for the 3D beat 'em up, well, like I said, this one would play kind of similar to a Warrior style game, and I know this type of gameplay isn't going to be for everyone, but I feel like for a game like this, I think it would work pretty well. Like having all these like characters just mowing down like hordes of enemies in like a huge open field, and then also having with some like bases you gotta take over as well. It would be a lot of fun for someone like me who likes this gameplay style, and plus it would also give Tecmo Koei some competition with their Warriors games. So as again, not a whole lot that I can say here, for that it is a pretty simplistic idea that would be some good old mindless fun. But now, as for the graphics and art styles, for the 2D beat 'em up, I think it should stick to a Super Nintendo look. As much as I would love for it to have like huge sprites with like beautiful backgrounds similar to Neo Geo, I don't think it would happen with a game like this, given like how many characters they'd put in here, and that would be a lot of work. As much as I would love it, I don't expect it to happen. So having a more simple like SNES look to it, I'd be perfectly okay with that. And as for the Growlancer style idea, well, it would pretty much just be like the main games themselves, having like 2D miniatures. But I do think that they should like upscale them more. And as for the games that could be in 3D, well, I think it would be best if they went for a more like cel-shaded look. And Capcom has done many games in shell-shaded style graphics, and they still look damn good to this day, so having like 3D graphics like that for a game like this, I think would look pretty great. As much as I'd love to have like graphical engine from like Resident Evil 2 or Resident Evil 8, I think that might be a little bit too powerful for a game like this. Of course, I wouldn't complain, but I just don't see it happening. And now, as for the music, well, I don't know exactly who would, compose, the music in these games, but you know for a fact they would definitely have a lot of, remixes from all the different games that these characters come from. So knowing that, they might actually have to get, a ton of different composers working on the game, kinda similar to what they did with, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And as for the final category I want to mention here, is that this is going to be a big one, and this is really just for shits and giggles that I just wanted to go through for fun, is that what characters would I have in this one? Now, because this is wishful thinking, I could easily just say, oh, just take every single character from every single game that all these companies have ever done and just throw them in there. Well, as much as I would love that, I don't think that would ever happen, and I at least do want to try to be somewhat realistic with this. So knowing this, obviously I'm not going to be mentioning any of the anime characters that Bandai Namco owns, so obviously none of the people from Shonen Jump. As much as I would love that, I just don't see it happening here. Also with Capcom, I'm not going to be mentioning any of the movie license stuff that they've been involved with, like Marvel, or The Punisher, or, Alien vs. Predator, nothing like that. And of course, Sega at one point made Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, so yeah, no Michael Jackson here. So what I decided to do was that I wanted to add in some characters that are already in the Project Cross Zone games, but also add in a couple more that I think would be pretty cool to see. And knowing me, yes, I also did throw in some obscure characters in here, but obviously I don't expect the obscure characters to be in the actual game if they ever were to happen, but they're just like I said, wishful thinking that would be cool. But realistically, they do have a chance to be in the game, since there's no licensing that they gotta worry about. So let's go over the Bandai Namco characters first. So firstly, we just start off with having the original characters from Namco x Capcom being Reiji and Zhao Mu, and the originals from Project Cross Zone being Kogoro and Koryuji. And then we're going to throw in some Tekken characters being Jin, Ling Xiaoyu, Heihachi, and Asuka. And as for Xenosaga, we would have Cosmos, Xion, and Telos. And then from .hack, it would be Kite and Black Rose, and from .hack GU, it would be Haseo and Endurance. And then you gotta have the classic Valkyrie from Valkyrie no Densu, and then from God Eater, you would have Lindo and Alyssa. And then from Super Robot Tyson, they actually showed up in the first Project Cross Zone, it would be Haken and Kaguya. And from the Tales of series, I decided to pick two characters from 3 different games within the Tales of series. So, firstly, there's Tales of Aspira with Yuri and Flynn, since, they're in the 2 Project Cross Zone games already. And for Tales of Berseria, it would be Velvet and Aizen. And for Tales of Arise, since I'm sure that game's going to come out by the time this thing would happen, it would be Alphen and Shione. And then for Soul Calibur, it would be Siegfried, Sophitia, Mitsurugi, and Ivy. And then from Code Vein, it would be Louis and Mia. And from 2 of their classic arcade games, we would have to include Mappy and Mr. Driller. And now let's move on to the Capcom characters. So we got Ryu and Ken, Chun-Li and Cammy from obviously Street Fighter. And then from Darkstalkers, it would be Morgan, Dimitri, Felicia, and Hashinko. And from Mega Man X, it would be, X and Zero. And from Devil May Cry, it would be Dante, Trish, Nero, and Virgil. And from Resident Evil, it would be Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Leon Kennedy, and Ada Wong. And Ghosts and Goblins, it would be Arthur. And for Phoenix Wright, the title says it all. And then it would be Strider, Captain Commando, Jin from Cyberbots, and I'm sure most people first saw him in the original Marvel vs. Capcom, Batsu and Akira from Rival Schools, and for Chaos Legion, it would be Sig Warheart and Arcia, and for Sengoku Basara, it would be Masamune Dante, Kojiro, Yukimura Sanada, and Takada Shingen. And for God Hand, it would be Jean, and for Okami, it would be Amaterasu, and for Final Fight, it would be Mike Hagar, and for Onimusha, it would be Jubei and Oyu, or also known as Oichi, and from Star Gladiator, it would be Hayato. And as for the Sega characters, so we would have Ichiro and Sakura and Gemini and Erika from Sakura Wars, and from Virtua Fighter it would be Paichan and Akira. And obviously it would not be confused with the Akira from Rival Schools. And from Space Channel 5 it's Ulala. Oh, and speaking of Space Channel 5, I don't know if they would actually still be able to use a Space Michael, since he was actually used with Michael Jackson's likeness. Just figured I'd mention that just because I mentioned Michael Jackson earlier. And from the Yakuza games, it would be Kiryu, Majima, and Ichiban from Like a Dragon. Now that right there would be pretty wild. And from Shenmue, it would be Ryo, and from Nightshade, it would be Hibana, and then you would have to have Sagata Senshiro, since he was in Project Cross Zone 2, and also because why the fuck not. And then there would also be Shinobi, and then there would be Bon and Candy from Fighting Vipers, and then from Zombies Revenge, it would be Rikiya Busujima. He was surprisingly in the first Project Cross Zone. Bruno from Dynamite Cop, aka License-Free John McClane, Blazing Axel from Streets of Rage, Vector Man, yeah that's a surprising one, Valkyria Chronicles with Alicia, Welkin, Largo, and Rosie. And from the Shining series, you would have Yuma and Sonya, and from Phantasy Star, you would have Rolf and Ney from Phantasy Star 2, and from Golden Axe, it would be Tiras and Gilius, and then from the game Rent a Hero, it would be Taro. And since because Sega does own Atlas now, I didn't want to go too crazy on their Atlas stuff, but I figured I would mention 3 characters from Shin Megami Tensei, being Joker from Persona 5, the Demi from Nocturne, and then of course there's also Raidu Kuzunoha from the Devil Summoner games. And last and not least, we have to mention probably the most amazing idea that has ever been in a fighting game ever, and that happens to be the car from Daytona, USA. Yes, just like from Fighters Megamix. That needs to be a thing in Project Cross Zone. So that's pretty much all the characters that I went over here, and yeah, that's quite a lot of fucking characters, but hey, might as well go all the way, right? But obviously, I know not all of them will make it into the game, but well, that's just wishful thinking. But like I said though, like I do feel like all these characters at least do have a chance without having to worry about like licensing or anything. And yes, obviously, I didn't mention everything. I mean, we can always just chalk up as the ones I didn't mention could be possible DLC choices. And I also didn't mention the villain characters from each of these series, since I would assume that you would know that if we're going to include these characters, that it would also come with the villain characters as well. Maybe not for all of them, but for a good portion of them. But there is 2 very iconic characters from 2 of these companies that I actually didn't mention, and the reason why is mainly because, well, they weren't even in the first 2 Project Cross Zone games, weirdly enough, and that happens to be Pac-Man and Sonic. Yeah, I was always confused why they were never in the first 2 Project Cross Zone games, or even in, Namco x Capcom, but, if they didn't even make it into those games, I can't even imagine them making it into this one for my idea. But anyways, at the end of the day, it was all just for fun anyways, and well, yeah, that's all I gotta say for my idea for a Project Cross Zone game that would be a huge improvement. So with that said, thanks for watching and commenting, and have yourselves a great day.